All right, so again, I want to welcome everyone to the webinar this morning. Really appreciate you taking time out of your day. I'm super excited to share with anyone who's considering starting a business any sort of content that you might need to facilitate your journey into the exploration of franchising. So I usually start with a little bit about myself. My name is Jane Stein, and I retired at 47 years old after 20 plus years in the financial services industry. I was a senior VP with what has now become Morgan Stanley. And then cut to 10 years later, after raising my kids, I grew restless, did some soul searching, and realized I'd always wanted to own my own business. So I started this business, Your Franchise is Waiting, this consultancy practice, because it encompassed all the things that I love and I'm good at. And that's the idea when you find a business, to identify an opportunity that will capitalize on your strengths, compensate for any potential weaknesses, and to be something that will at least bring you some joy. And so this business, involves helping people, problem solving, researching, putting pieces of the puzzle together. These are all the things I really like to do. And essentially, I'm a matchmaker for people and the right business, because I believe the right business is out there, and it's just a matter of finding it. So there's more to the story, and when we get to the end of the presentation, I'll share the rest of it with you. In this webinar, we're going to spend 45 minutes or so going over the basics. And then as a follow-up, you'll all be offered a free copy of my ebook, The Girlfriend's Guide to Franchising. So it goes into much more detail than we're going to go on here. So I'll be monitoring the question box that should be on your right. And, well, it may be on your left. I think I moved my GoToWebinar box. You can actually move that box from one side to the other. Anyway, there's a chat box. There's a question box. I'll be monitoring that. This is a great opportunity. It's a live webinar, which means you can ask any question that you might have in a completely safe environment. In other words, we don't know who you are. We'll probably never meet. This is your chance. And no question is stupid. Recognize that everyone on this webinar is going to appreciate you asking the question that they were probably thinking about anyway. So that's pretty much the agenda for today. Let's see. I usually show this screen that talks about if you're having trouble on the audio, but it doesn't look like anybody has raised their hand. So I am guessing that there's no problems. Okay, so we're just going to go on now. So let's start with, what is franchising? These are all the things we're going to cover. What is franchising? Why people go into business for themselves? What are some of the benefits? What is a franchise consultant? Again, we're going to start with the definition. Hold on. Okay, very good. So a definition is that a franchisor grants to the licensees, who are his franchisees, the right to operate their own business under the franchisor's trademark, utilizing their identified system and method of doing business for a particular period of time. So it's an agreement that for 10 years, for example, you are able to operate your business under their trademarks and method of doing business, generally within a particular territory, not always. Okay, that's the classic definition. But what is it really? So first of all, franchising is not a business or an industry, okay? It's just a business strategy. It's a way for a company to grow. that is different from just opening up 100 new locations. They're simply opening up those same 100 locations, but using other people's money. It's also a very efficient distribution session. For example, a good feed store, their primary business is selling orthotics. So they utilize the franchise system. They have hundreds of locations nationwide, and those hundreds of locations essentially are distributing their product, which is their orthotics. It's just a way of leveraging growth, again, using the resources of stakeholders and forming strategic partnerships. So what are some of the elements? Basically, first of all, there needs to be a brand. It's a recognizable logo or trademark expression. It might be simply proprietary products, services, recipes, information. There may be some patents. There may be some designs. So that's all considered to be part of the brand. The second element of a franchise is that there should be, and there is, an operating system of some sort. And this operating system allows for institutionalized excellent service to be delivered in a way that can be done over and over again from unit to unit in a consistent manner. Okay, so now we have a brand, a series of trademarks, logos, products, services, recipes, way of doing things that are better. That's all considered part of the brand. We have the operating system, and then we have a support system. So in a franchise model, the franchisees or licensees are going to receive support in the areas like financing, accounting, training. They're going to receive full training. They're probably going to receive a lot of support around hiring. They definitely are going to receive support around marketing, technology, operational materials, etc. So what we have so far are three elements of a franchise: the brand, the operating system, and the support system. And the final one is, in order to be a franchise, there's going to be fees. There's going to be an upfront fee, and there's going to be ongoing fees in the form of royalties. More on that later. All right, let's talk a little bit about why people go into business for themselves. So some of the common reasons that I hear over and over again, let's start with freedom. Freedom to determine your own schedule, when you take vacations, how long you take vacations, freedom to take off in the middle of the day to get your hair done, freedom to be at your kids' sporting events, freedom to run it your way within the constraints of the operating system that the franchise concept requires, but the freedom to execute it, I should say. Same thing here, control. People are, when you own a business, there's only one person really that's responsible for your success or your failure, and that person is you. And people, it's frightening and it's empowering and exciting. And so again, if you simply are going to work as hard as you can and you have passion and you have tireless work ethics, you're probably going to succeed. And most importantly, you're going to know that it was completely your own efforts that got you to that level of success. And that's very exciting for a lot of people. Threat of job loss, a lot of people get into franchising because they've been laid off a time or two and they don't want to see that happen again. Sometimes people go into franchise businesses because they have a particular passion or purpose. There's a franchise called the British Swim School, and their motto is survival of the littlest. And I read an article in Entrepreneur magazine about a couple that invested and are running a British swim school business because their child almost drowned, and they never wanted to have any other parent in their community go through that again. And so that's, a common theme. Some people are passionate about the elderly, and they had a terrible experience with their parents getting home health care, and so they launch a senior care franchise. And there are many great senior care franchises. Sometimes it's lifestyle. People are just tired of being on an airplane every week. If you're an executive level in the C-suite, you just want to be home. You want to be home on weekends. You want to be home on evenings, in the evenings with your families. So, and sometimes lifestyle means you just want to break into a higher level of income. There's no way you're going to hit the level of income that you need or want in your current profession. That's a common reason. Of course, it's a way to build an asset. Of course, it's a way to work with families. Sometimes retired couples, retired in their 50s, want to work together on something fun. It is a way to leave a legacy, and it also um, is a way to take care of children in some instances. I've seen this work. I've also seen it not work, and not work badly. So that's a tricky one. The last one I want to highlight, because I hear it a lot, is, look, people say to me, I am working my butt off, and I'm going to be always do that. That's the kind of person I am. And if I'm going to work that hard anyway, I want it to benefit my bottom line. So let's cover some of the benefits of franchising. This is just kind of a quick visual, and I think you'll get it right away. When you start your own business, you're going to be grappling with everything. First of all, not the least of which is coming up with some killer idea that hasn't been done. You're going to grapple with branding. You're going to trademark your logo. You're going to deal with marketing. You're going to try and come up with operational systems, which will be developed through trial and error, a lot of painful errors. You have to pay for your own technology, which is very costly. You'll have to develop a website, very costly. That's the guy on the right, lost and alone in the woods, trying to check out the map. There he is. Franchising is more or less on the left. It's not reinventing the wheel. It's just finding a system and a business concept that feels right for you, and then just working hard, persevering, and the odds of you eventually succeeding go way up because there is already a system in place that's been tested and tweaked over time. Someone recently told me that system stands for save yourself time, effort, and money. And that is really a definition of the franchise model. Those who have gone before you in this particular business, especially the founders, they've made all the mistakes. They've spent all the time and money, usually years and $100,000 or more, developing the business model. Then they've tweaked it as they get franchisees. Those franchisees give them feedback, and those early franchisees complain about things and they fix them. And basically all those kinks have been worked out ideally before you get going. So why invest in a franchise? Again, all the reasons we've talked about and a few more. It's reduced risk. The proof of success is in place uh, because of other franchisees that have gone before you, who you're going to call. We'll talk about that. So reduced risk, you're not recreating the wheel. You do get tremendous training and support from the franchisor. Collaboration, it's a lot more fun to be in business with a lot of other people. And so all the franchisees get together typically once or twice a year at a convention. Everybody shares best and worst practices. Those are likely to be the first people you call when you have a question. The systems in a franchise are continually being adjusted, changed, and improved because there's all of this nonstop feedback from the field, from the franchisees. And the franchisor, who's smart, takes all that information into consideration and tweaks and improves their marketing and their operations. There's training systems in place. There's sales and marketing strategies and systems, in place. There's manuals. There's all kinds of other documentation. There is very often very expensive, state-of-the-art supported technology systems. That's one of the huge advantages of a franchise. And all of those development costs that the franchisor spent upfront developing their brand, developing their recipes, their way they do business, the way they deliver the services, etc. That's now a shared resource of all the franchisees. And last but not least, vending relationships and buying power. Tremendous discounts involved that you could never achieve on your own as a solo business owner. So let's talk about those fees. Because franchising isn't for everyone, and some businesses shouldn't be a franchise. It has to work given the fees. So franchise fee is the first fee you're going to pay. And basically that's just the cost of putting the franchisee into business with the franchisor. It's a check you'll write as you sign your franchise agreement. More on that later. It can be anywhere from $15,000 to $70,000, but generally is around $30,000 to $50,000. That's sort of the normal range. And again, it's the entry fee that just gets you to the point of completion of the initial training programs. So you write that check when you sign your agreement. Now you can attend full training, and now you'll learn all the secret sauce. And that fee allows you access to all of the other franchisees. Access to all of the franchisors' systems. So again, all of their secret sauce. You're also going to pay a royalty fee, and a royalty fee is a percentage of your gross sales, usually 8 or 10. I've seen 3, I've seen 25, but 6 to 8% sort of normal, and it's paid weekly right out of your gross sales. And that is how the franchisor model works, because the franchisor makes money on the royalties. They participate in your success. They're incentivized for you to succeed. That's all they care about, is seeing their franchisees make as much money as they can, because then they're participating in that growth. And that is the oil that makes the engine run, because those fees are what the franchisor uses to reinvest in the brand and improve the business for everyone. And last, you'll pay some sort of, typically, of an advertising and marketing fee. This is maybe 1 to 3% of gross sales, and that goes into a pool. The franchisor doesn't keep the money. They use that money. It's a separate pool of money that they use for advertising and marketing, which benefits everyone across the system. So let's take a few minutes here and talk about the whole evaluation process, because one of the things about franchising is that it is regulated and highly regulated by the Federal Trade Commission. So, for example, it's not possible to agree to join a franchise within 14 days of receiving the disclosure document, which lists all the legalities. We'll talk about that. It's not legal, or it's not appropriate for the franchisor to make earnings claims that are not supported in the franchise disclosure document in a very uniform way. So it is highly regulated. That's the good news. This is how the process looks. First of all, it's a system of discovery. There's a period of time, weeks at a time, where you're getting to know the franchisor and they're getting to know you. It's a two-way exchange of information in a very processed, step-by-step sort of way. There will be a qualification system in place. Again, early on, you're going to be required to disclose your net worth, your background. They are looking to see, A, if you have the net worth that they believe you should in order to risk investing in this business. They're going to see if you have the skill sets as implied by your past experience to see if you could be a successful owner. And this, again, is really step by step. There should be, and it is typically, an open and honest exchange of information. I've been on calls where the franchisor says, I have to tell you, I don't think we are what you're looking for, and here's why. You too will need to be disclosing things. I've had a candidate who was not allowed to drive, and she was, good enough to share that early on in the disclosure. If there's been felonies, bankruptcies, all of these things matter. Sometimes it will disqualify you from a business model, not always, but it must be disclosed, and they're going to find out anyway because they eventually do background checks. So this whole process typically takes, I've never had somebody close on a business within 30 days. I've heard stories, but I've never had it happen. It's usually a month to 2 and often 3. That's really from start to finish how long you can expect before you'll be in business. And you should never feel pressure to move quickly. Everything you need to know in order to invest in this business should be accessible. Again, sometimes what you need to know are financials, and we'll talk about that shortly. Those won't be provided to you by the franchisor. They'll be provided to you when you call existing franchisees. But you will get all the information you need in order to feel confident moving forward or to feel confident not to move forward. But all of that happens on a schedule set by the franchisor. I've had candidates who got impatient. They want to know everything on the first call. It doesn't work like that. There will eventually be open access to all the franchisees in the system. And the goal, again, is to feel comfortable that you've made an informed decision about being strategic partners with this particular franchise concept. So these are the actual steps that you're going to go through. First of all, you're going to be introduced to someone at the franchise concept. It might be the actual owner if it's a smaller company. It might be, and usually is, somebody called the franchise development guy. There may be a bunch of those, there may be one, but it's the person in charge of the franchise development of the system. And that is typically just an hour-long call, that opening introductory call to get to know you, for you to get to know them, just some basic information on that first call, what the owner does on a daily business, varying from firm to firm on what kind of information you'll receive on that first call, but never a lot. It's just a get to know you call. The second step is at some point along the way, and by the way, there may be 2 or 3 more calls before this step, but at some point you're going to be disclosed, and that means they're going to provide to you that regulated document that has 23 items that are standardized so that every franchise you look at has the same 23 items. And that document, that 200-page plus document, is called the franchise disclosure document. You're going to receive it in an email. You're going to have to acknowledge that you've received it right away. So as soon as you get it, they ask you to sign a form in the very back. It's on the last page that you literally print out, sign it, and fax it back. And it just says, here you go. It's document that I've received this disclosure document. In that disclosure document is outlined every possible thing that you would need and want to know about that franchise. All of the estimated startup costs, all of the things that the franchisor is required to do for you, all of your obligations as a franchisee, including possible quotas, all of the information that they provide in the way of training. It outlines the full training that you'll receive. All the ways in which you can be terminated as a franchisee or terminate your relationship, all disclosed. Also disclosed, and this is the greatest thing about franchising, is a list of all the franchisees across the country that own one of these businesses and their phone numbers. So shortly we're going to go through that. Anyway, in the back of that franchise disclosure document is the actual agreement that you'll sign should you agree to invest in this business. That's what makes franchising so discoverable. You will know so much more about this business before you invest than you ever possibly could in starting your own business or in investing in an existing business, frankly. So anyway, the next step in the discovery process, and this may be before or after disclosure has occurred, is that you're going to slowly be introduced to all aspects of the secret sauce involved by that franchisor. In other words, you're going to hear just a tiny bit. They're not going to tell you everything. They're not going to tell you trade secrets. You don't get the trade secrets until you've signed up and gone to training. But prior to that, you're going to get all your questions answered around how does one market? How does one generate leads? What support will I get from home office regarding marketing? Who will I hire? What kind of employees will I have? How many? How do I get them? How does the real estate selection work if indeed it's a bricks and mortar business where there's a physical location? You're going to hear all about the basics of how they do every aspect of their business from the franchisor, typically over a series of calls. And in addition, at some period of time, as I mentioned, you're going to get this disclosure document. Now, the next and most important step is validation. And validation is where you are going to pick up the phone and call existing franchisees. And by the way, anybody who's left the franchise in the last 3 years is also in that document. So for sure, you're going to call them. And you're going to actually call and ask a series of questions that you and your franchise consultant, me, have strategized around based on what's most important to you, including how much money do you make? When did you break even? Those are all the things you want to know, and they can really only be found out by calling existing owners. Is it embarrassing? Maybe. Is it I've had people say, I can't believe they would tell you that. I'm like, well, they do, but not everybody does. So you keep calling. You keep calling until you find people that will talk to you, that will take your calls. Sometimes you have to leave 20, 30 messages to get 3 people to call you back. They're busy. They're not obligated legally to talk to you in most cases. And so they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart, and they do it because they love their brand. So, and they do it because they want to help you. Somebody helped them, somebody picked up their call when they made the decision, and they want to help you make your decision. So that part about calling other franchisees is really when you will decide. That is where you'll know that the brand isn't right for you for one reason or another, or it will really feel like it is right for you. Now, along about this time, you're going to want to retain a franchise attorney, not Uncle Joe, not your dad who's a business attorney, a franchise attorney, specifically an attorney who just works in the franchise world and has for some period of time. They are in the business of reviewing these documents for potential franchisees. That's all they do all day long, in addition to helping franchisors create and craft the documents. So you're going to pay a little money here, assuming you're still interested, maybe $1,500 or $2,000 even, and you're going to have an attorney review your document because it's 200 pages. By now you've read it through a couple of times. By now you've printed it out, highlighted some things that are concerns to you. You've asked the franchise director about those concerns. He may or may not have answered them to your satisfaction. This is the time to go over all that with a franchise attorney and decide if there's anything that you would like to ask for a modification on with the franchise. Sometimes things are negotiable. Fees are never negotiable. But what can be negotiated sometimes, depending on the size of the brand, meaning larger brands, virtually nothing's negotiable because they have 1,000 units. But some of these smaller brands with 50 to 100 units, you can negotiate a little bit around maybe territory. You can negotiate maybe a little bit around what happens if you die, to your business. So things like that that really concern you should be addressed. Now that you've addressed all those things, and by the way, once you've worked with your attorney, he or she will tell you this is normal, this is not, this is a problem. You'll go back to the concept and you'll say this is a deal breaker if I can't modify this. They'll say yes or no. There's a little negotiation that goes on at this point. Now, once those concerns have been addressed, you get to go fly to home office and meet all of the operations people you'll be dealing with on a regular basis. You'll be meeting the staff basically and the principals of the company, because up until now you've only been talking with the sales team selling the franchises. Now you're going to be dealing with the operations people. So it's a full day, a long day. You fly in, usually at your own expense, by the way. Sometimes they reimburse you if you invest later, like that day or the next day or the following week in the business. They sometimes will reimburse your expenses, usually not, believe it or not. So you fly in, you meet the team, you spend the day, you have a nice dinner with all the other people. These are held once a month usually, and so there will be other people there that are also looking at this business. Then you fly home, and typically after that is when you'll be awarded your franchise territory. Or not. I've definitely been involved in situations where after Discovery Day, my candidate was not approved to be advanced. It does happen. So after Discovery Day is when you'll be offered the franchise. And it's called an award process. You have to be awarded the franchise. You will not necessarily be selected. And at that point, if you agree to go forward, you sign your agreement and you pay your franchise fee. Voila. And you literally write a check for your franchise fee right up front. And like I say, that now you start scheduling training and all of that. And those are the steps. So at some point along this way, you're going to have to face your fears. Um, there's fears involved in realizing your dreams. There's risk. These are common, expected fears. We all have them. There's fear of change. There's fear of failure. There's fear of just what you don't know. That's all perfectly natural. And the naysayers are going to be everywhere. You are suddenly going to hear from every single relative um, that you know. And it's important to listen to all these people, but you're going to know in your gut. You are. So trust yourself as well. There's never a perfect time, just like there's never a perfect time to have babies, but people do have babies. And these are the stars that should line up in order for you to move forward. First of all, you should be able to secure financing. We need to find out early on in the process if we can get any financing for you. Your family should be on board. Your territory should be viable. If you live out in the middle of the country in a town of 3,000 people, there's no location in the world that's going to be successful there. You're going to need to look at a different kind of a business, a home-based business perhaps that involves telephone sales of some sort. You should feel ready and excited. This is a little slide that I like to show to women when I'm doing these women's workshops about why women are made for business. And I'm not going to go through all the points, but I think you'll see that there are some inherent strengths that we as women have that lend ourselves to business ownership. And I'll put it another way. These are all qualities that you should have that will make you a successful business owner. If you're not a lot of the things on this list, then perhaps it's not for you. Why use a franchise consultant? My answer to this is always the same. Why wouldn't you use a franchise consultant? First of all, you're going to be able to access a lot of insider knowledge through working with me. I have a network of franchise consultants / brokers all over the country, many of which are 10, 20 years in the industry, in the business. I know what brands work. I know what brands don't. I'm not going to show you the brands that I know don't work. This is going to reduce your franchise research time quite significantly. I'm going to help you prepare for your franchisor meeting and phone calls. I'm going to coach you through your validation calls, help you understand what you're hearing on those calls. You're going to gain better access of the terminology and the process through working with me. I have all kinds of resources at my disposal, tools, demographic tools. I have all the good franchise attorneys all over the country. Typically, I'll have flat rates with a lot of those. I can get you funding. I have deep connections to the lending industry, all of which, bottom line, costs you nothing. So it's not like you can get it cheaper by going on your own. It's not like I'm going to try and, quote, sell you a franchise. That's not what I do. That's not my job. That's the franchise director's job. My job is to help you identify and evaluate the franchise models to see which one, if any, are right for you. So why wouldn't you want to have an advocate, somebody in your corner? Again, doesn't cost anything. Oh, I should explain, by the way, the reason it doesn't cost anything is our model is exactly like realtor models. In other words, you don't pay a realtor when you find the house, they show you the homes, and ultimately their commission is paid by the seller of that house. It's exactly the same in this business. Ultimately, my referral fee is paid by the franchise business that I've introduced you to. Sometimes people are stuck, and I find it very helpful to ask yourself this question. If I were to do nothing and just stay where I'm at, will my situation be better or worse a year from now? That helps you determine if this is your time to start looking into this or not. If your situation is going to be the same or maybe a little better a year from now, hang tight, hang tough. But most people come to franchising because they're in a point of pain in some way. They're nervous about money. They're nervous about getting laid off. They're miserable in their job. There's some reason that they're unhappy. And they know that a year from now, it's only going to be worse. Time to start looking. And I'll just leave this on the screen at the end. This is a great quote by Brian Tracy, who's a very well-known business expert. And to me, it just kind of lends itself to franchising. I'm going to end with my contact information on the screen while I finish the story and tell you the end of the story. So remember that I had retired and spent 10 years or so raising my boys. The first one goes off to college, and I get a little restless. I don't know what I want to do, but I get this idea that I want to own a business. And so like a lot of you, the first thought that popped into my head is I want to look into a franchise because I've never owned a business. I would need support and training, and it was an attractive model for me. So I start going on the internet and clicking on send me more information about XYZ franchise, as you may have done, and that might be how you got connected with me. So what happened was this gentleman, nice gentleman from Tennessee, I live in Colorado, calls me up and says, I understand you're looking into a franchise. I'm a franchise broker. I'd like to help you. I'm like, sure, great, sounds good. And that's how we get leads in my business, by the way. That's probably how I got a lot of you. I'm licensed nationwide in all the states with the exception of Washington. And that's because Washington requires annual paperwork, which I'm worried I'll forget to do, so I just didn't bother to license in Washington. So anyway, that's what happens when you click on a link. You're going to be released to a lot of franchise brokers. Your contact information will be released to a lot of franchise brokers. So anyway, along this way, I'm talking to this guy. We go through the process. He's taking me through his process. It's a couple of months. At the end of it, I realized that all of my background, training, skill sets, and really what I wanted in a business, all of which perfectly aligned with me being the franchise consultant that helps others look into various business models. So that's a funny story. That's how I launched my business and became a franchise broker. So thank you all for attending, and I look forward to speaking with you at some point in the future when it's your time. Okay, have a great one.